see right there is a sampling of about 6 or 7 Arab American scholars from across the nation speaking of the importance of both the book and her collection. And for those reasons, we're here tonight to honor her for the Lifetime Achievement Award. We're very pleased to have Mr. Clay Ferris Naff with us this evening to accept the Lifetime Achievement Award on behalf of the Naff family. I should point out before he comes up that Mr. Naff is a writer himself, a science writer in fact, and he's taken a detour from a conference on the other side of the country to be with us this evening. However, I'd be remiss in not pointing out that he is an award-winning journalist and author. He's been a Tokyo correspondent for the UPI, a freelance reporter for National Public Radio, and most recently he published his own book called Free God Now. Pleased to present Mr. Clay Naff with the Lifetime Achievement Award.
Well, I have to say, I am truly humbled to stand before the mother of a courageous and brilliant journalist and to stand before so many accomplished writers. I'm thankful to the museum for allowing me to represent Alixa here tonight, and to Joe Geha and many others who've expressed their appreciation of Alixa. I do have just one complaint, though. No science writing award, Ken. Come on. Some of you knew Alixa, and some of you know her work. She was a central figure in my whole life, next to my parents, the most influential adult in my life. And to sum up a person's life in a very few minutes is really an impossible task, so I won't attempt it. I'm going to draw on my own professional background and tell you that as a science writer, I'm well aware that people have been gathering around fires for more than 1 million years to share stories. It is, along with several other things like opposable thumbs, the essence of humanity, telling stories. It's how we manage to share our identities and indeed create our identities with one another. My Aunt Alixa knew more than anybody about the value of stories, but she was such a determined person. You know, all extraordinary people are a bit difficult, and she certainly could be that. But if she hadn't had such a passion to recapture this history before it disappeared into the dust that we all turn into eventually, it simply wouldn't have happened. Universities at the time were not interested. I can tell you, because I heard from her own lips, that the Smithsonian was not very excited about all these interviews that she had done, but she forced them to be. And indeed, she forced her way into many kitchens and sat people down and got their stories from them. Some of you here are immigrants. Some of you are the children of immigrants. I dare say, in the broad perspective, everyone is the child of immigrants. So I want to leave you with a few suggestions based on the example of Alixa's life. The first is, ask your elders. If they're still with us, ask them. Get their stories. And the second is, cherish those stories. Show your children or the young people in your lives the value of those family stories. Some of them may be whoppers, I can tell you. I heard stories about an aunt of mine who came through Ellis Island and had an eye infection, and they were afraid they were going to send her back, so they rolled her in a carpet and they carried her through Ellis Island. Yeah, right. That happened. But you know, after Alixa passed away in June, a few months later, we were able to gather together the elderly remaining relatives in our family. And just as we'd hoped, and just as Alixa would have wanted, they got together and they told stories. Now, these are very elderly people, so none of them could hear the others. So they all talked at once. But I managed to videotape most of it and decipher some of them. And you know what? Some of those stories were true. They really were. I mean, when you hear it from different sides of the family, you figure there's enough corroboration there to establish credibility. The basic journalist rule, 2 independent sources. Yeah, good enough. So for years, I figured my aunts were just making up this stuff about Danny Thomas. What connection do we have to Danny Thomas? But it turns out Alixa went on a double date with Danny Thomas's brother and Danny Thomas and his date. And Danny Thomas said something very rude about my Aunt Alixa when she was walking to the restroom, and that was it. Evening over. She was a fiery person. Cherish your stories. Whether they're true or not, they have a deeper truth to them. They're about the relationships, the fears and hopes that made your family what it is and contributed in some way to who you are. We're all the product of the experience of our forebears and the stories that they tell about those. I really am deeply honored to have a chance to stand here and accept a Lifetime Achievement Award for Alixa, and I know how much this would have meant to her. She struggled all her life. She drove in a little Beetle across the country, one time taking me, other times on her own. She drove across Europe, she drove across the Middle East. She managed all on her own, sometimes just eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, to collect stories and keep them. And she would so much appreciate that her work had value to others. So thank you very much indeed. I want to let you know that the Arab American National Museum is going to attempt to preserve and to make those stories available to others. Not just the stories of Alixa or our family, although those can be pretty entertaining. But there are so many other stories to be told as well. And so family and friends have created something we call the Friends of Alixa NAF Fund. We want to help the Arab American National Museum to digitize those remaining tapes and to make them available to the whole world, and indeed to encourage others to bring their stories forward and make them permanent. So on behalf of the family of Alixa NAF, I'm pleased to be able to present a check to start that fund off. And Devin, if you would be kind enough to accept this, a check from the family of Alixa NAF for $1,000 to start the fund.
On behalf of all of us, we thank you very much.